Critical realism and critical theory. Are they the same thing? And if you are a critical realist, does that mean that you have to turn into a social justice warrior and start demanding social change? Or can you still be a critical realist and just not do that part of it? That's what we're looking at in this video. If we've not met before, hi, I'm Dr Elizabeth Yardley, and I help PhD students get out of their own way and finish their doctorates. Paradigms can be quite a big stumbling block for PhD students because, let's be frank, nobody actually explains what they are very effectively. And by the time you get to your PhD, by the time you get to grad school, you kind of feel awkward asking about them because you should just know this stuff by now, right? Well, don't worry, because one of the things that I love doing on this channel is demystifying paradigms and showing you that they are nowhere near as complex as they might seem. They are nowhere near as complicated as other people might make them out to be. A while ago, I made an introductory video about the critical realist paradigm. I'll link to it up here. And I've got to say, I loved hearing from you all in the comments. Your questions, your stories, the way you're all using critical realism in your research, amazing. And if you haven't done so already, after you finish watching this video, just go and take a look at the comments in that video because it's fascinating stuff. I'll link to that video in the description as well. One thing I did notice in the comments was that there does appear to be a little bit of confusion around some of the finer points of critical realism, especially in terms of whether it's inherently about social justice or if it's kind of a critique of power, the difference between critical realism and critical theory. So I thought I should make a video about that, hence current video. Let's get into it. So first up, is critical realism about social justice? Okay, first things first, let's talk about the word critical. When people hear the term critical realism, they often think it's about being critical of social systems or it's about pushing for social justice. And whilst that's true, a lot of critical realist research does focus on social issues. The paradigm itself is more neutral. So why the word critical? In critical realism, the word critical means that we are diving deep. We're questioning what's going on the surface. We're trying to understand what's happening beneath. So it's less about criticising and it's more about inquiring. Imagine you're at a party and everyone's just chatting away. A critical realist walks in and says, hang on, I want to know why everyone's here in the first place. What's the event really about? Who decided on the guest list? They don't want to shut down the party. They just want to understand the deeper dynamics that brought everyone to it. Now, let's take another example to make this clearer. Say you're studying access to healthcare. A social justice perspective might immediately focus on inequalities and advocate for changes to make healthcare more accessible to people. And don't get me wrong, that is super important. But a critical realist approach would take a step back and say, all right, let's look at the underlying structures that cause these inequalities in the first place. What hidden mechanisms are at play here? How do funding models, policy decisions, and economic factors all come together to create this situation? Whilst a lot of critical realist research can support social justice goals, the paradigm itself doesn't mandate that. The paradigm itself doesn't say that that's required. It's more about digging deep and understanding the causes, understanding what is going on behind the scenes. Whether or not you use that information to push for change is up to you. Next up, the differences between critical realism and critical theory. Critical realism, critical theory, this is a very common mix-up. They sound similar, right? But they're actually quite different, and a few of you were asking about this in the comments on that original video. Critical theory, especially as it originated in the Frankfurt School, is all about critiquing and challenging societal structures. Think of it like a very intense debate club that's determined to call out injustice wherever they see it. They're asking what's wrong with society and how can we fix it. Critical realism, on the other hand, is like a detective. It's more about understanding than critiquing. Critical realists want to uncover the hidden forces and the hidden dynamics that shape what we can see on the surface. They're not necessarily interested in changing the entire system. They're just trying to understand it as fully as possible. Here's an example that might help. Let's say you're researching economic inequality. A critical theorist might say, all right, we need to dismantle the structures that lead to this inequality. They're focused on finding the bad guys, so to speak, and bringing them to justice. A critical realist, meanwhile, might approach it differently. Instead, they might say, okay, let's look at all the factors at play. How do things like tax policies, educational access and job markets all interact to create this situation? What's the relationship between these elements? So the big takeaway here is that critical realism isn't inherently about critique or change. It's about understanding the layers and the structures that are at work. You could apply critical realism to just about any topic without taking a stance on it, without taking a side on it. You're just trying to see the bigger picture. You're just trying to figure out what's going on. Now, before we get on to the next point, I want to hear from you in the comments. Are you using a critical realist approach in your research? So get typing below. Are you using it right now? Are you thinking about using it? Are you just finding out about it? Are you definitely not going to use it? I'd also love to know more about your research, so tell me what you're working on. Get typing and I'll look forward to reading your comments later. Now, I know some of you might be thinking,
but wait, I've definitely seen critical realism used to critique social issues.
And you're right. Just because critical realism itself doesn't demand a social justice stance, that doesn't mean it can't be used in that way. So while critical realism itself doesn't have a political agenda, it can be a really powerful tool for social critique. If you're passionate about social justice, critical realism can help you uncover those deeper systemic forces, those things that might not be immediately visible. Critical realism can allow you to see the social world in layers, the empirical, the actual, the real. And it's in that real layer where a lot of those hidden things are hanging out, those mechanisms and those structures that drive things like inequality and injustice. But here's the key thing. It's not critical realism itself that's calling for change. It's the researcher's choice to use what they've uncovered to advocate for change. Critical realism gives you the map. It's up to you what you do with it. One last thing I want to touch on is how critical realism is like putting on a series of lenses that enable you to look at different layers of the social world. You get to decide how you interpret what you see through those different lenses. Think of it this way. If you're looking at a garden, you might first notice the flowers and the plants. That's the empirical level, the stuff you can see. Then you start thinking about the soil, the water, the sunlight. Those are the actual things that sustain the plants, even if you don't see them right away. That's the actual level. Finally, you dig even deeper, maybe analysing the pH balance of the soil or the root systems underground. That's the real layer. And those deeper things influence everything else, even if you don't notice them immediately. So if you were a critical realist studying a garden, you're not there to say,
"Oh, I don't like these flowers. This soil is terrible."
You're there to understand how it all fits together. What makes it grow, what sustains it, even what might eventually cause it to wither away. And that's where the power of critical realism lies. It helps you see those hidden layers. It gives you a fuller understanding of the whole system. Popping up on your screen right now is another video you might find helpful if you're interested in learning more about paradigms. It's the first video in my paradigm series, so go and check it out. I'll see you in there.